Hello and welcome back to the history of video gaming. My name is Ben and I'm joined by the one and only Wes. How you doing, Wes? What's up?
I am doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's right after Thanksgiving and I had a nice little break. How was your break?
It was good, yeah. Ate lots of food. Uh,
That's good.
just kind of chilled. It was nice.
I tried to do like half chill, half work, which to me is like a lot of chill. So I was like pretty happy.
Yeah, nah, that's a good balance compared to what's usually going on. So,
Yeah, all work all the time. Not good. What is good is I get the time to play some games. So I got some
ooh,
stuff to talk about.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, do you want to start off, or should I get us started with those?
I kind of want to start off
All
because
right, go for
I'm
it.
really excited. Yeah. So I think I kind of teased this a little bit last week, but I wanted to go back to the old Jedi Knight games. And unlike NBA Street, which, you can't really play anywhere other than on like the original hardware that came out years and years and years ago, Jedi Knight is actually on Steam. So I was able to just purchase it again. That there was a Steam Thanksgiving sale. I ended up buying this bundle that was all of the Jedi Knight series for like $8.
Oh, sick.
And I was like, this is so good. And since I got all of them, I decided why not start with the very first one. It's so old that I've never played it. It's a MS DOS game called Star Wars Dark Forces.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've heard of that one.
And it's so weird though, because I bought it on Steam, and when you buy it, it actually downloads DOSBox, the emulator, and then you play it through there. But it's the official version. Like,
That's hilarious.
what's weirder is like I bought it and I got these weird graphic glitches, and I looked it up, and you have to update DOSBox like manually. Like they're behind on the updates, I guess, in the Steam version. So once I did that, it worked fine. But I was like, why do I have to do this? Like, isn't this what I'm paying Steam to figure out for me?
Right, yeah.
But I thought that was funny. But yeah, I played through Dark Forces. I played through it pretty much as true to it as can be. I did find out that there's like graphics overhauls and a lot of like modding and stuff for the game because it's so old. But I I viewed the original graphics as kind of disgustingly throw uppy as they are, because it's like a 3D first person shooter, but in 1995, or I'm not quite sure when it came out, but
Right.
old 3D games are not good lookers. The texturing is so bad. But for what they had to work with, I think it actually kind of still holds up pretty good. The character models are pretty good, and it's Star Wars, so you have nice Star Wars music and blaster sounds and all that good stuff. And yeah, I played through it. I'm at the very last level right now. I've been playing through it on hard mode and trying to get every secret. I've been using a guide for the secrets because otherwise there would have been no way I'd be able to find them. Like some of them involve laying down a mine or explosive and then using that force to blast you to where you need to go, which has been a little challenging at times.
It's like rocket jumping. Yikes.
Yeah, but I was able to do it. I'm on the final level now, and in the beginning when I was in hard mode, it was like a good challenge, but now at the very, very end, it's like nearly impossible. um, but I've only given the last level a couple playthroughs. I want to try a couple more times before I don't know what I'm gonna do. If I know cheat modes are in the game, maybe I'll turn them on a little bit, or
Oh yeah,
I
nice.
don't know. I'm not planning on like going crazy trying to do this. I just want to kind of complete it at this point and move on to the next one because I kind of want to play them all in order and see what the differences are and the upgrades have been over the years. So, and the ones I played as a kid, I think were the final two in the series. So obviously, I really want to get to them. But it's been fun going back and learning the origins of Kyle Katarn, who's like, I think by now a
Oh.
kind of really famous character in the lore.
Yeah, I wonder if he's part of the legends or if he is canon lore, but probably
Yeah, I don't
legends.
know. Probably.
Nice. I'm curious when you get to those ones later in the series if they're the ones I remember, because I distinctly remember a couple Tie Fighter and Millennium Falcon sequences.
Ooh, okay. I don't remember those, but I think I was never very good at them, to be honest, back in the day, but I'm really looking forward to getting back to them now.
Nice.
So yeah, the first game is a purely FPS, kind of like in the Doom style. So
Okay.
there's no real lightsaber sword play. You know, you're very much like a mercenary, and that's like your title. So, but you do pick up some pretty cool weapons. So a fair amount of them can kill you as well, which has happened many times.
Oh, nice.
But it's pretty fun actually. I've been enjoying it. I've been making good progress. I had a lot of time to play, so I went through like 14 some levels. So yeah, it's pretty cool, and they're big levels. But I'm on the very last one now. Looking forward to the end.
Nice. So then you're starting with that and haven't gone into a Jedi Knight yet, or
That's right. Yeah. So I'm starting there. I think the next one is Dark Forces 2, and then it's like Jedi Knight. I forget which is the first one. Maybe Outcast, and then I think the last one is Jedi Knight or Jedi Temple or something like that.
okay, sweet.
So yeah, I'm planning on doing it in order. I was hoping to do this one like 100% on hard mode. I don't know if that's gonna happen, but we'll do what we need to do to move on.
Yeah, yeah. You can make some compromises there to make sure you actually make it through the game and call it done.
Yeah. I mean, if I go through 99% of the game on hard mode, I feel pretty good about myself.
Close enough. Yeah.
But what have you been up to, Wes? You've had some days?
Yeah, yeah. So I have played a lot and taken like sort of a deep dive back into Star Citizen, as I was talking to you about a little bit, because they have a big event going on, which is free fly for a bunch of ships. And I didn't realize this till a couple days ago, but also anybody can download the game for free and play it until December 2nd, even if you haven't pledged for any of the ships.
Nice.
And it's a crazy freaking game, man.
Wait, so did you have to re-download it?
No,
How big is the
I've actually
download now?
been. Oh, my friend re-downloaded it, and it was like 60 gigs, which honestly,
Okay.
not too bad.
Yeah. Considering how big it is.
Yeah, I think it was like a 12 gig like base game package, and then like updates or something that were like 50 so gigs or something.
Hmm.
It didn't take him too long, although he did run it overnight instead of downloading it and then playing it. So who knows if
Right.
there was more downloads that we didn't see happen. But it just reminded me how insane the game is, how much of a simulation and space simulation it is, and not just like spaceship game. They've added, for better or for worse, hunger and thirst for your characters. So you have to
Oh
like
yeah.
eat and drink. But since it's the future and not a survival game, it's not like, cut down this tree, find some berries, make a fire to get your character to survive. It's like you go to a burrito stand, then you buy a burrito. It's
Right.
so strange. And I kind of like it. I mean, it's pretty immersive in enough ways. I'm waiting for them to add something where I'm like, just don't make my character like go to the bathroom, or like something like that. Like
Right.
that's
There are bathrooms on the ships.
I know almost every single one that's like a 2-person ship with like a bed has a
Yeah.
bathroom. And that's
Yeah.
dangerous because I don't want them to put that in the game. But yeah, and just the fact that this whole free fly event revolved around a in-game lore event, which was a ship expo, kind of like a car expo. And just the fact that that exists, and it's like, yeah, instead of just being like, hey, it's free fly, there's actually like in-game reasons for why it's a free fly event,
Yeah.
is a little bit insane to me. I also would like a little bit less realism in the fact that you have to go to the planet that has the expo and go into the expo hall to be able to rent ships for free instead of just like pushing a button saying, I want to try this one,
Right.
which is a little weird. But despite all that weirdness, I've been reminded by just about how much I like this whole genre and just this gigantic open space sim that, for the most part, actually works. There's still, of course, many, many bugs. And part of it, me having a good experience with it, is me being like, okay, don't land on that planet because bad stuff will happen. They all like fall through the world. I was showing the game to my brother and dad the other day, and I was like, oh, I'm in quantum travel. I wonder if I get into the bed in my ship if it'll, you know, break the game. And so I got into my bed and it just like my ship kept going and I was stranded in space. So there's still lots of bad stuff, bad bugs and things that make it unplayable, but they're avoidable enough that like you can do the whole gameplay loop, like of bounty hunting or cargo hauling. And for the most part, like you can actually do it,
Right.
which is much further than this game has been before, at least when I've played it, despite being 6 years in development, I think. But I'm just super excited. There's long term persistence in the game now, which, as far as I know, means that they aren't wiping every character's progress every single patch and update.
Oh, really?
So there's a reason for me to grind to buy a ship because I might
Right.
actually have it like a month or 2 months from now, um, which is super exciting. Even though, of course, there could be a patch where they're like, hey, we're changing enough stuff in this patch that we're going to wipe everyone's progress.
Right.
But at least there's some like semblance of long term persistence. So that's really exciting. And that's kind of like I'm set on winter months just grinding so I can quote unquote own a better ship. I
Mhm.
did the math one day because I was like, how much time do I want to spend playing this game? And it was something like if I do bounty hunting straight for like 40 hours, I could get a new ship. And that's a lot, but it's also not as horrible as I thought.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the game is that some of the bigger ships, like if it's for two people, they expect two people to be throwing in their money to get it, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, there's almost like joint ownership and like for the capital ships, which you would have to be insane to solo grind enough money to get one of them. It would take like a year of your real life. It makes sense that you would have like 30 people, like a guild
Yeah.
basically, raise the money, give it to one
Right.
player, and then have them own it. Um,
Right. That sounds really cool. I'm definitely gonna check it out.
oh, yeah, yeah, for sure. Especially once I get that two-seater I'm saving up for.
Oh yeah. Does that one have a turret in it? Because I feel like I'd be a good turret gunner.
Yes, it does. And that's why I'm going to buy
Nice.
it.
Perfect.
But yeah, so I've been loving it. There's like enough there for me to do and enough bypassing of glitches that I can have a good playable experience. So I'm really excited. It's
Nice.
a good time to be back into this Ponzi scheme that is Star Citizen.
Right.
But I think with that,
Nice.
I mean, we can move right over to our special topic for the day, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
So 2 weeks ago, we started talking about some of the consoles that are coming out in 1978 in the Soviet Union. The first one being the Turner, which means tournament in Russian, I believe. And we thought it would be an interesting topic because at this time, the Soviet Union has very strict control over its people, being the Soviet Union, and it's putting out the video games instead of like independent developers in Ukraine or Russia making their own games. So we wanted to do a little bit of a look at what the heck's going on there and how that works, basically. Uh, so all of the games from I think around 1978 to 1980, maybe with a few small exceptions, are being created by the Ministry of the Electronics Industry, which they release everything under the brand name of Electronica.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it's basically the government is making all these games. They're also making a bunch of other electronics, and I imagine their names on like toasters and stuff. I don't know if they actually made that, but it's a pretty broad thing, and it was like a subdivision. I think specifically the radio division of the electronics industry ministry that started making these video games, and part of it is tied to the fact that the U.S. and Russia at this time, like going back and forth, taunting each other about socialist versus capitalist society, what's working better. And I think the US had just put something out like making fun of the Soviet Union, maybe just saying, like, hey, look how prosperous capitalist society is. And so
Mhm.
the Russian leader at the time, Khrushchev, dedicated a ton of resources to modernizing the Soviet Union. And part of that, I imagine, is like, hey, they have video games, let's make video games.
It seems like such a weird thing. Like you think their energy would be focused on radios and refrigerators and stuff. Like,
Right.
but someone's like, no, people are asking for this.
Well, I think part of it's sort of like it kind of gives this image of like wealth, that like if your
Right.
if your populace has the time to buy an expensive leisure So I think that's part of it too, although we're not seeing a lot of games come out of the Soviet Union at this point, so it might not have been a huge focus. But it seems like that's why it started to pick up now. And a lot of the early arcade games that came out in the Soviet Union too, going into the early 80s as well, sort of like matched the tone of the Soviet Union's messaging to its people. And a lot of it was like celebrating the idea of like becoming a soldier or like stuff very specific to Russian folklore for at least the Russian releases of those games. So it's interesting that it sort of trickles down. And even if it wasn't like blatantly go Soviet Union, it's like, hey, like, let's make video games that also promote pride in our country, which is really interesting. And many of the consoles that were being made at this time were being based off of Japanese and American designs just because they had already both been pretty far ahead at this point. And the Turner console that I mentioned was actually used the AY3-8500 chip, and it stayed in production until 1982. So in the Soviet Union at the time, having like no availability of video games before then, the AY3-8500 chip was probably still pretty revolutionary and exciting, at least if they weren't looking at the US messaging saying like, wow, look how advanced video games are over here now.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like, I couldn't find concrete information, but it seems like independent developers started creating their own games in the mid to late 80s, both for arcade machines and computers. And eventually down the line, I forgot about this, but Tetris is going to come out of former Soviet Union country, Russia. So obviously, eventually it's going to be, we're going to see out of Ukraine the Metro games from developer 4A and the Stalker series from GSC, and tons of Russian games. And of course, everyone's on the same level now pretty much. But at this time, they were just cloning AY3-8500 chips for consoles like the Electronics AXI Video 1 and 2, just to kind of keep up and make it look like their people were just as prosperous as America at this time. So then some interesting stuff looking at Russia after the Soviet Union fell and how it sort of caught up and made some interesting video game news in 2001. I think it was one of the first countries to officially recognize esports as an actual sport. So, they kind of caught up to everywhere else in making decisions like that. Although in 2006, they then reversed it and said, no, it's no longer a sport. But then in 2016, they're like, okay, yeah, it is a sport again. And there is still some weird stuff where, as recent as 2010, the Russian government urged its local game developers to create patriotic games because it said many foreign games are anti-Russian. And although that does seem a little bit like propaganda-ish, you got to give it to them. Like, how many games are Russians the bad guys in? It's not a good look for your country if you're just like, all the Call of Duty games are selling there, and you're like, come on, guys, like, what are you doing this for?
Right.
So it's interesting to see how it's changed. And, of course, a few years after, I'm thinking into the mid 80s, we'll see less of a grip of just the government producing them. Although since the Soviet Union's around for a while, I'm sure it's still going to have influence on everything that's coming out in any of those countries.
Yeah, definitely.
It'll be interesting to keep an eye on. I'm curious to see. I think for many years, they're going to be behind. It'll be interesting to see when like everything starts to kind of level off, and they're on the same playing field.
Yeah, I feel like first gen is kind of like the only time when they can make their own. Like, would it be possible for them to clone a 2600 and have it be their own thing? I don't know. I kind of doubt it. We'll see. I don't know. But yeah, I just think it's a really interesting topic. So we're going to talk about really quickly a couple more Russian consoles at the end of today's episode, so stick around for that. But in the meantime, we've got some other games to cover.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Let's get straight into our timeline today. We got some weird stuff to talk about, some awesome stuff to talk about, And to start off, we're talking about creative computing, the March April issue, where we got some kind of what you would expect going on. The first one that we wanted to talk about is Oil Company, which is a business simulation program. Not really much of a game, probably similar to a lot of the supply demand kind of stock ish sort of games that we've seen before. And then the next one is a little bit more interesting. We have Racetrack, which is ASCII graphics, Grand Track 10 type game. We only have the code, but there are some pictures, and it might have actually been a pretty decent computer representation of it.
Yeah, anything with like nice ASCII graphics, I'm pretty much a big fan of.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So, and to have it in a magazine, I thought was so weird, so cool. All right, but let's move on. We got the big one for today, the Visicom Com-100. I've also seen it abbreviated as the C100 by Toshiba, which came out the 1st of April in 1978. And this one's kind of a weird one, Wes. It's got a kind of interesting story, I think. I definitely wanted to have time to check out. So, to get into the backstory of it, we're talking about the company Toshiba, which is still a really big company today. And back in 1978, they were still a really big company and they made just about everything you could think of. But they wanted to get into video games, I guess. And at the time in 78, apparently the only second gen consoles that were in Japan at the time were the PC50X line. And that's it. There was no Atari 2600 at this time. And that kind of gave Toshiba the feeling, the opening that, oh, we should try to do a second gen console. At the time, I think they have done first gen Pong games before, but they wanted to really make something and have it feel premium. I think that's what they were shooting for. I'll talk about the console itself, but it's kind of metal and it's supposed to like look good and feel good, and it's priced pretty high. So that's kind of the market they were going for. But they wanted to do the second gen console and they didn't want to do a PC50X. And so they contacted the RCA Studio company,
Ooh.
which I don't know why they did that, but apparently RCA was pretty happy to sell its designs to anybody. At the time, the RCA Studio II was basically done, and they were working on the RCA Studio 3, which we'll talk about probably next episode, actually. But yeah, they worked with Toshiba and they sold Toshiba the rights to their games and designs for the RCA Studio 2. And Toshiba looked at it and were like, this sucks. I don't know what they were thinking, but apparently they knew that they couldn't release a black and white second gen console in Japan. Like even the PC50X line is in color. So they redid a lot of the work for the RCA Studio 2, and they made it so that it is in color, and there's also detachable controllers among with some other little tweaks and changes, which to me sounds like basically a brand new system.
Right,
but
yeah.
I guess it's still really the RCA Studio 2 hardware. But I think they even had to go into like the individual games and change a couple little like things to get everything working. And they also changed the way the cartridges were designed. They seem a lot more modern for the cartridge designs. They're like I don't know what the right term for it is, but it's like a very thin metal strip, almost like a floppy disk kind of look to it
Okay,
that
interesting.
plugs in instead of like the big bulky NES cartridge style that we usually see. But that meant that the original RCA Studio 2 games wouldn't work with this system. They remade all the games into the new style. I don't know if that was to make people like forced to buy their games as opposed to like RCA Studio 2s and plug them in. I don't really know why they did that, but maybe it's part of the premium thing. I'm not really sure.
Right.
But to me, this console is really the RCA Studio 2.5. It's the RCA Studio 2, but it's in color. That fixes some of the worst things about the console. And there's detachable controllers and a couple brand new games that I'll get into. But that's kind of the background of it. As far as what happened after it launched, it was released in April, which for a premium console, it's not a really good time. I mean, I read an interview with somebody that said, "Yeah, we really should have launched it like around Christmas when people are looking to spend a bunch of money." But this is I don't know why they did it in April.
Right.
And also even with the improvements, it still was like not great in terms of what it could do. I mean, I'll get into the games, but you know some of the games for the RCA Studio 2, if they're not like running much better, then it's not really any like the graphics help a little bit, but they don't
Right.
fix a bunch of core problems.
That's not what saves it. Yeah.
Yeah, so there were still issues. And then the other thing I read is that Toshiba wasn't really in the toy business at the time, so it had to sell this console through home appliance channels and department stores and stuff. So they credit that as being an issue why it didn't really take off. But I think as soon as like by this time next year, it's essentially dead. And I don't know if Toshiba does any other games after this.
Wow.
But it's an interesting little console that I thought the story behind it was pretty cool. Anyway, I would definitely love to have one. I think it'd be a cool one to have. Definitely over the RCA Studio too. I mean, I'll
Right.
say that. But let me get into the games since there's not a whole lot of games for the system, even though it is a second generation system. I decided we'll just do all the games right now, even though some are sold separately and were probably released a little later. I'll just cover them all now. There's not that many. So let me talk quickly about the built-in games. This is the same as this RCA Studio 2. You have Addition, Bowling, Freeway, which I think was your worst rated game of the year was,
Yeah.
Pattern, and Doodle. So all of those are the exact same as the Studio 2. They play exactly the same. It's just that they're in color, and that does help. I'll get more into what the color looks like in a sec. But then you also had ports of other RCA Studio 2 games. The ones that we know for sure were ported were one called Arithmetic Drill. That was the original game Math Fun and Fun with Numbers. Then we had one called Space Command, and that was a port of the RCA Studio 2 game Space War. And then we had one called Gambler 1, which was a port of Blackjack. So all of those are straight from the RCA Studio 2 company and were exactly the same. So let's get into the new games. So there's 3 new cartridges released for the system over the course of its lifetime, and that's it. But the first one is called Sports Fan, and this actually has baseball on it, which again you reviewed, Wes. That's an RCA Studio 2 game, but then it had a second game on the cartridge as well called Sumo Wrestling.
Ooh.
And I was really excited to look at this one. I just think the name is awesome. It's so Japan, Sumo Wrestling. It's like if you had to have one more game on the system, I'm glad it was that one. And I actually found video of this. I had to look it up by its Japanese name, which I mean, I can't read Japanese, so I copy pasted it from somewhere, but I found it on YouTube. And it's pretty cool looking. I've got no clue how to play it. There's not a whole lot of documentation for this, but basically it's a dark background, and we've got kind of like a circle shape, which is the sumo ring, and then 2 characters in the middle that are sumo wrestling. And I don't really know how you play it, but essentially the characters can be pushed and pulled, and if one person goes outside the circle, they'll lose the point. But you can also like throw people, I guess. And these are really, really basic graphics and sprites. But considering that they have kind of animation for a lot of this stuff, I was just like laughing to death when I saw the throw. I was like, oh my gosh, they actually like the guy, his stick figure arms come out and kind of go over the other person and then lifts him up over his head, and then the guy kind of flies horizontal for a little bit and then goes down. The whole process probably takes like 30 seconds. But I was just like couldn't believe that I just saw that. It also keeps score, and there's also a figure of, I'm guessing, the ref in it who just doesn't move. It's just like a little stick figure. But I really think sumo is really cool to look at. I wish we had more info and better video on it, but there's definitely like a lot of different sprites that are used in it. I'm pretty like it doesn't look like an RC Studio 2 game. It looks more like a kind of more like an Atari 2600 game, except things are a little bit more blocky and there's not as much color going on.
Wow. Still pretty impressive.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of like Sword Fight, that one that you did a while ago, Wes.
Right. Yes.
But just with like nicer sprites and some sort of weird. I don't know if it was like rock paper scissors type system or something like that. I read in I found this site that has a lot of information on the Com 100, but it's all in Japanese, and the translations aren't the best. But they said that you can't really like win in it. It's kind of random. So I don't know if it's a great game, but I think just visually it's very interesting, and I love the concept behind it. So I really like that one. And then for the other new games, we have got Gambler 2. This one's probably the most boring to me. It just has the game's slot machine and dice on it. And I read what dice is. I still don't know what dice is. Apparently, it's some sort of gambling game where you're looking for a certain dice roll that's random. But I don't know if you like bet. I guess you bet on each one. So I think it's just a purely gambling game that's just RNG. No, I mean maybe there's like strategy. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I've played, or I know like similar dice gambling games, and I don't know, they're confusing depending on how many rules there are. There might be strategy, but pretty much like you're saying, it could just be betting on getting like odds or evens or a certain number.
Right. And then the last cartridge is called Inspiration. And of all the cartridges, this one I could find basically no information on. It's listed in a couple databases as being a cartridge, but I haven't found any video or images of it at all, including on the Japanese site I mentioned, which has information on every other game, but it doesn't have it on this one. So maybe it didn't come out, maybe it was just a prototype, I don't know. But apparently the games on that cartridge were called Bagua, Blood Typing, and Astrology, which kind of sound like not real games to me. Sounds like maybe some sort of information, or like it kind of sounds like biorhythm in a way. Like maybe you put in like what your astrology sign was and it said something, or gave a
Right.
graph or something. So either way, it's probably not a big deal. But that's all the games for the whole system that will ever be released. The highlight to me is really sumo wrestling. But it did have a couple other new games, Slot Machine, and it had ports of some of the best games for the Studio 2, like Space War, and even stuff like as simple as bowling or baseball, I think are pretty nice additions to have in color. So let me get into my ratings for the second gen console as a whole. Starting with gameplay, I gave it a 1.5 out of 10. I like the addition of sumo. I don't know how good it would be to play, but I just think the game's fun. And I like the fact that there are other new games for the console, even if they're not my thing, like Slot Machine. But obviously, there's some sort of demand for that stuff. And yeah, just playing other games that I've played before, but now they're in color, it does make you be like, wow, this was just better than the other one. So, and I think the highlights again are bowling, baseball, and Space War, even stuff like Blackjack. It's just nice to see it in color. So overall, I think it's a pretty good selection of games here. Obviously, I could have used for more games, and if the quality is as good as sumo wrestling was, I would have loved to see Toshiba do more. But I'm not like too upset about the little catalog that they made here, especially like comparing this to like a first gen console. It's kind of how I'm thinking of it anyway, since there's not really any longevity with this catalog. For graphics, this is probably the biggest improvement, so I give it a 2.5 out of 10. Some of the games like sumo wrestling, I think, look genuinely pretty good. Other games like baseball, I don't know if you remember Baseball West, but it had the weird like Pac-Man mouths as people.
Yes, yes.
It's like, could they have changed that to be a little bit better? They could have, yeah, but they didn't. It's a straight port. It is in color, and the colors in general look good. I think it's just four colors. It's like blue, yellow, red, and green, and black and white. But I think they do a really good job with the colors. In general, the shades of all the colors I think are pretty nice to look at. There's a really dark green for the green that they went for, and that puts games like Blackjack on a really nice green background that we've talked about before that
Oh yeah.
really helps with it. And they do a good job of alternating the colors or having a lot of using the colors to the best that they can. Even stuff like some of the shooting games, the projectiles might be the color of the player or something like that. So it does help a lot. The colors definitely help a lot of the games come alive. For sound, this was bad. I gave it a 1 out of 10 because they didn't add any new sounds. And if you remember, the RCA Studio 2 just had, I think, a single Pong sound. And stuff like Freeway, your worst game of the year, it still runs terrible and it still has no sounds being made if you're just like driving.
That
It's
kills me.
completely silent. So yeah, that wasn't good. For relevance, I give it a 3.5 out of 10. Obviously it didn't sell very well. So I don't think it really impacted a lot, but maybe the RCA Studio 3 that's coming up took a little bit from this company because it was all happening kind of at the same time. And the fact that it is the RCA Studio 2.5, I just think it's a really cool little piece of history. And like, I like it a lot, but I can understand that it didn't really take off. It's pretty hard to find information for this console. And so overall, I gave it a 2 out of 10. It's okay. The color definitely helps a lot. And it makes it feel more premium for sure. And the fact that the console is like really high quality metal pieces and detachable controllers, it just seems like a way better version of the RCA Studio 2. As much as I would love to see different games and like games like Freeway taken off and never thought of again, it did port over a lot of the old RCA Studio 2 games that maybe weren't the best, but you also had some new ones in there like Sumo Wrestling, which just looks awesome to play. And apparently, the atmosphere at the time in Japan was maybe ready for some sort of really big second gen console. Like obviously this one wasn't it, but I think it still kind of left a really cool mark in history. So I really enjoyed it, as weird as it was. But yeah, that's the Visicom Com-100 by Toshiba.
Interesting. Yeah, that's super cool. I mean, it's what we wish the RCA Studio 2 was out the gate, but
Right.
it's nice to see another company take it, have a crack at it. Maybe, well, I was going to say maybe the market was more receptive to it, but if it only lasted a year, it probably wasn't.
Yeah. That's a good point, actually. That's what it does feel like. It feels like the RCA Studio 2, but actually second gen instead
Right,
of so far behind the times, which is what it was. But
right.
I think that's a good little summation of it, I think.
And with that, let's move on to actually right into the first game that I took a look at.
Oh yeah.
So I covered one that was never released called Atari Mini Golf by Atari. We have sort of dates for 1978. It's foggy because it was never released.
Mm-hmm.
We could kind of theorize it would likely be released around 78, 79, based on how it looks and the fact that it was originally proposed through interoffice communications in May of 76. And I think there were some games proposed around that same time that actually did come out towards 77 or 78. So
Yeah.
either way, it kind of makes sense to talk about it now. There's no real release date though. And it seems like when I'm saying that this one was proposed through interoffice communications, it seems like at the time there was sort of, I guess, any of the creators or employees at the company, or maybe it was specific positions and this was just the format that they did it, but they had this proposal form where they would write out the game name ideas, some gameplay ideas, the intended hardware that they wanted to use for it to be able to achieve all these. We found a proposal for a missile attack type game, and the guy actually did like a drawing of how he wanted it to look at the very bottom of it. So it's pretty cool looking back at these sort of just the communications inside of Atari, and this was one of those that was prototyped and actually seems like it made it pretty far in development, but just was never released.
I love the prototype system. Or the proposal system. I just think it's like so cool for a company to be like, "Oh, you've got a really cool idea, go for it," or give me a proposal and go for it. I feel like you would never see that nowadays. Anything outside like a 10-person studio.
Yeah, and that's why I'm curious. I wonder if it was like, hey, anybody propose an idea? It kind of sounded like that.
It sounds like the guy who wrote the proposal was like, "I'm gonna do this." Maybe that wasn't the case, but that's kind of what I got from it.
Yeah. So it's neat that there's a couple of these that sort of you can see in the pipeline and follow their progress. But Atari Mini Golf is basically what it sounds like. There actually was a pretty playable version, emulated version of this that we could take a look at. So it makes me think that it made it pretty far in development. The game itself is a top-down view of mini golf. It's got everything from sand traps that slow you down to water that if you hit it costs you a stroke, and uphill and downhill sections too that kind of increase your speed or slow you down, whether you're going uphill or downhill. There's also some static barriers on the different courses and moving barriers too, which looks a little like they threw a pong paddle in there, but it's a video game, so you could pretend it's a mechanical, an animatronic thing in a mini golf course or something. So it seems like there are 18 holes. I didn't get through all 18, so there could be more. But from the videos I watched them from when I played it, it looked like there were about 14, so I'm guessing there was at least 18 holes in this. At the end of the game, it gives you the amount of strokes that you took versus the amount of holes completed and gives you a rating of, I think, poor or good or great or maybe perfect. The way it scores is a little strange, though. It's just additive, counting up your strokes, and the par is additive too. So, like, it'll be par 2 on the first hole, and then the second hole, if that hole is par 2 as well, it'll say your par is 4, which I guess makes it easier if you're not familiar with golf scoring.
Right.
But it was really confusing to me because it was like I had 30 and the par was like 27. I'm like, okay, so I'm 3 over par over a few different holes or something like that. Like,
right.
There weren't like bogeys or eagles or negative scoring or anything like that as far as I could tell. Although I also didn't do very well, so maybe there was negative scoring. And at the end of the game, I did notice that it says white and then the score. So I'm guessing there was also a black for player 2. So it seems like it was sort of a turn-taking 2-player game. The version that we played looked like it was only 1 player. And for the main actual hitting of the ball, you could aim it anywhere in 360 degrees. And it seems like you can control the strength of your hit pretty well, too. So for the graphics, when I was rating this, it's all black and white and gray, which isn't great, but I did give it a 2 out of 10 because it has some pretty nice details that make up for it. The screen always looks full, which I was not expecting from this kind of game. I mean, they could have just put a hole on there and had nothing in the outside, but they actually have some pretty nice grass and trees, similar to, I forget what the racing game is that we played recently. That might have been an Atari one, but where the grass and trees are flying by, it looks a lot like that. It's pretty good.
Oh yeah, it was a Taito game.
It was. Was it
Super Speed Race 5? Yeah.
Yes, Super Speed Race. Yes. So they look a lot like that, and they look pretty. I mean, simple, but at least it's something going on the screen. And the courses also take up a decent bit of the screen too. So all that looked good. There was no blank space. The holes themselves had a good amount of visual variety in them too. There's hash marks, sort of like slashes and darker sections for the uphill and downhill sections. There's white dots in these little clusters for sand, little waves on the screen for water. And each of these are pretty good. And they all were labeled too, which was nice. So you knew what each section was. But overall, it was still pretty simple. Still black and white, basically. Each obstacle, even though it was labeled, it kind of made me think if there were colors in it, you might not have had to label them, you know?
Right.
Like the sand would have been brown, the water would have been blue, and then you get it just by looking at it. So it was really good, but it didn't feel like it was with the times. And again, that's a little wishy-washy, hard to rate it because who knows? Maybe at this point in the development, it was 1977, and it would have been a little bit more appropriate. But overall, it does look pretty good, just a little plain. For sounds, I gave it an NA. There weren't any sounds in this game, but again, it's hard to tell whether the person who emulated this couldn't locate any sounds, or if there actually were no sounds at the time or at the stage in development that it was in. My guess would be that for a 77 or 78 game, Atari would have put sounds in it. So I'm thinking it would have had sounds on full release. But since we have no idea what they sound like, we can't really rate it based on that.
Yeah, I think so too.
And then for gameplay, I gave it a 1.5 out of 10. It's pretty fun mini golf gameplay. It's kind of exactly what I would expect from an early golf game. There's 3 hazards, which is pretty decent, but overall it still feels kind of simple. There's a full course you can play through, but they all play in the same order every single time through the 18 holes. Also, the scoring, like I mentioned, just seems strange. Like it's not what I was expecting from a golf game. But overall, it does play well. It's just, I would have liked a little bit more, I think, with the gameplay to keep it more interesting.
How was the like the hitting? Was that a satisfying part of it?
Visually, it was a little weird to tell where your ball was going. It was like these strange flickering graphics to show you the direction, which was a little strange. The hitting felt okay, but it was, since you're just holding down a button in the emulator, there's nothing to tell me, okay, I'm at the strongest point of my swing right now. So there was no real feedback for that. It felt like I was always hitting it pretty hard. I could kind of gauge it, and it was nice that it did seem like if I just tapped the button versus held it, there was a pretty decent difference between like your lightest and strongest hit, but it still wasn't that fine tuned. Like I couldn't like putt it, basically. It seemed like I was always kind of hitting it and hoping it would bounce off something into the hole. So pretty good, but not great, not super fine tuned. And then for relevance, I gave it a 5 out of 10. It's a little weird because I think it's relevant because it made it so far in development and didn't get released, but that's sort of also why it's not relevant. I think from the from the lens of this being probably the first or one of the first straight up mini golf games, not like a golf game, I think that that's pretty relevant. Even though it never came out, it's cool to see this process of how the games were being developed at Atari. So I think it's relevant because it's a example of that you can actually play and look at. But since it never came out, it's not relevant as far as impacting other games in the timeline or in the history.
There's going to be, I think, an Atari mini golf for the 2600. I don't know if it had to do with this game at all. I'm not saying that, but there's potential that it could have. I don't know.
Yeah, and I was wondering the same thing because, 2 years from now we could see a mini golf game or some kind of golf game that uses like 3 elements from this.
Right.
And, if this made it this far in development, I'm pretty sure they're going to reuse like at least something, unless it's just really outdated or something like that. So, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say exactly what it impacted, but maybe some of the Atari games that we cover in the future, we'll be able to look at them and be like, that definitely came from mini golf. And then overall, I gave it a 2 out of 10. Mini golf is a fun arcade game. It's true to its name, does kind of exactly what I expect out of it. And it has some neat features for a mini golf game, but it still just feels simple overall. I can't really say why it was canceled, but it seems like a pretty awesome Atari game. And I love that it's this unreleased game that's still playable in some form, so we can take a look at some of the ones that didn't make Atari's cut.
Yeah. Usually I'm not like a big prototype person to check out because usually they're like really bare bones. But
right,
this one and what was that other one, the Digger one that we did?
Yeah, the Time Bomb, right? Isn't that what it was called?
Yeah, that's it. They were actually like pretty good games, I thought. So I'm glad we looked at it. All right, but should we move on, Wes? We got another Atari one coming up.
Ooh, yeah.
Atari City here in April. But this next one is called Avalanche, released in April of '78 as well. And this one is one of these games that I've known about for like 3 years now for our timeline. I don't know why, but I think it's one of Atari's more popular ones. Even though I read that it didn't really sell well, I think it's been remembered pretty fondly.
Hmm.
So let me get into exactly what Avalanche is. It's essentially a Pong game. I mean, it's not really Pong. They try to cover their tracks with it, but I see the Pong in there. What you have is a bunch of there's supposed to be boulders on the top of the screen, and they fall down one by one, and you've got this weird kind of, it's like 5 or 6 paddles stacked up one on top of the other with some gap in between. Almost kind of looks like the rungs of a ladder, but without the side pieces. So a bunch of paddles stacked up, and your goal is to catch all the falling boulders. And if any of them hit the ground, that's game over. And there's no like 3 lives. It's like that's it. So you really have to try to catch all the boulders as they fall. And the boulders come in 3 different sizes. The biggest ones are the most boulder like. They have a kind of, oblong, weird kind of shape to them to make them not just pong balls. But I like them. I think the design's kind of cool. But then after 2 rows of those, we get 2 rows of like red boulders. But these ones, they're smaller. First of all, and the reason that they're smaller is that they're gonna fall faster and they're worth more points. But because they're smaller, they don't look as good as the big ones. So it's more just kind of like a rectangle shape. And then at the top part of the screen, you've got 2 rows of the yellow boulders, or I kind of think of them almost like gold nuggets because that's what they look like. Little gold circles
Right.
that will fall, and they fall the fastest. So that's really the game. Every single boulder that's on the screen when you start the game will fall at some point, and if you can catch all of the balls, you actually get a new game, but this time you have less paddles to work with, which I think is kind of cool. And I think you can do that 3 or 4 times. You can get like 3 or 4 new games out of this game. It does eventually end, which confused me because I saw that there's a high score for this game, official world record, but it's way higher than where the maximum score you can get is. So maybe it's over the course of multiple games. I'm not sure. Yeah, so I think you get like 3 or 4 games worth before the game just ends if you win it all. But it's essentially kind of you're catching stuff falling from the ceiling and it can't hit the ground, and that is a concept that I don't think we've ever seen. I mean, we've reviewed a lot of games in the timeline so far, but I think this is the first time we've seen it, and there's got to be hundreds upon thousands of games that use that kind of concept nowadays. I mean, if I just like open up my mobile phone device and look for games, I'm gonna find like hundreds that do this.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's kind of a pretty big game in history. There is one more mechanic to it, and that is that whenever a set of boulders from the top is completely finished, one of your paddles actually disappears. And I think it's random which one goes. So you start with like 6 or 7, and then after the first line is gone, you lose a paddle. So it's a little bit harder to catch things because if you've got like 6 or 7 paddles stacked up, you can kind of just like run right to left, and chances are something will hit one of those paddles as things fall down. But if you don't have as many paddles to work with, you have to be a little bit more skillful when you play. So that was kind of a nice little mechanic that they added to try to make it a little different. But that's essentially all Avalanche is. You're catching stuff from the top. I do like that every single boulder is accounted for and will drop, and it's not like a spawning in system, which is what I kind of thought it was when I first looked at it. So every row has to completely fall before the next row starts to fall. So you can actually do some strategy where, oh, I see a lot of boulders that haven't fallen are on my left side, so I know that's coming up, kind of deal. Which I kind of like. It adds a little bit more strategy to it, although it is very hectic. There's probably, I don't know, at least 4 boulders falling at any one time, maybe more. And the smaller that they are, the faster they fall, and they can fall pretty fast at times. It can definitely feel hectic. So it's really easy to see how far you've gone in the game and how much more you have to do if you want to get that new game, which I think is a great little feature. Instead of things just kind of randomly spawning in, which is kind of what they do in games today. So
Right.
I like this version a little bit better. But yeah, that's kind of all it is. Simple, but nice little fun game. So for gameplay, I gave it a 2.5 out of 10. I thought it was pretty fun to play, actually. I enjoyed myself with it. It has feelings of Breakout. It has feelings of Pong, but like with the stakes are like really high because if you miss a single one, it's game over. So you have that going, and I don't know, catching things in the air game. Obviously, since it's a game type that is still around today, it's a fun game to have. So I enjoyed myself with the gameplay. For graphics, I gave it a 2 out of 10. The boulders are definitely like not just Pong balls, and that's good. Although there is just Pong paddles catching them. um, and then you had a overlay on top of all this. So underneath it, all of it, it's just black and white. But you had an overlay on the top that had all the paddles and the first two rows of boulders in blue, and then the next two rows of boulders in red, and then the next two boulders in yellow. Honestly, like since it's just a bunch of kind of circle things and like Pong paddles, I don't know why they couldn't have just done it in true color. Like I feel like it wouldn't have been that hard. I know for a fact that this is going to get ported to the 2600 at some time. Obviously, that's going to be in full color. So if a home console can eventually run this game, I don't understand why an arcade machine wouldn't be able to do full color. But it is weird when the small boulders at the top all of a sudden change from yellow to red and now they're blue.
Right, because they're moving so fast.
Yeah, and the majority of the playfield is in the blue overlay. So by the time you see like the small ones fall, they look blue to you. Like so it kind of, even though there is a little bit of color, everything kind of in the playfield feels like it's blue. So I don't know. I think it just would have been better in true color, but it at least has the color overlay that helps a lot. And they do have some unique looking sprites for the boulders. So I wasn't too harsh on it. I gave it 2 out of 10. For sound, this is the big like this is the reason why you're not going to play this game today. You've got essentially two Pong sounds, maybe it's three Pong sounds. I think it's just two Pong sounds. They sound very boring, just like any Pong game. But then you have, since it's called Avalanche, I want to say it's supposed to be like the wind, like avalanches are happening or some sort of, I don't know what it's supposed to be, but it is legit just like white noise put in
Oh
the
no.
game. And the more you play in a game, the louder it gets. And I just was like, why is this in here? Like the Pong noises by themselves don't sound good. And now this is in here. It's like the gameplay was fun. I was enjoying myself, but I didn't play another game because I didn't want to have to listen to the white noise. I think it would have almost been better silent. But it's not good. So I gave it a 0.5 out of 10. It's the worst thing by far about the game. And then finally, for relevance, I gave it 7.5 out of 10, which is a lot. I read that it didn't sell very well because of some other really big games coming up in the timeline, but this seems to be one that's remembered pretty well. And I think the impact it has with falling games where you catch something or where you have to prevent something from hitting the ground. I know for a fact that there's other games like that that come out in 78 later in the timeline, so maybe this influenced that. I mean, I'm even thinking about games like Fruit Ninja. It's different, but it's also kind of like this is the first time we've ever really seen anything like this, and it seems like such an obvious gameplay mechanic,
Right.
but the reality is we've not seen it before. So I wanted to give it props and relevance. I also want to quickly say the cabinet itself also had a cardboard cutout over the screen that just had a bunch of boulders on it. So I think it's got a kind of a striking look to it, and although the digital graphics aren't the best, I can see why it's remembered pretty well. And it does kind of feel like in a sense, Atari made Pong, then they made Breakout, and now they're making Avalanche. I can kind of see that progression a little bit. So I think for a lot of people, this might have been the first time that they played an Atari product, and instead of Pong or instead of Breakout, it was Avalanche. So I think it's pretty well remembered, honestly. So yeah, overall, I gave it a 1.75 out of 10. It's a great game. I think for the gameplay, the sound kills it for me. Makes me want to not play it. And that's kind of a shame, but it had color graphics, it had some sprites. It tried to not be a Pong game as much as it could. I think Pong paddles kind of kill it in that respect. If it was like a sprite of a dude with his arms open, it would have been a lot more fun, I think. But I don't know. I think it's an interesting type game that combines a lot of different elements from things that we've seen, but is still different. So I kind of liked it. Avalanche.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it's not what I was expecting. I gotta be honest, the color overlay throws me off a little bit, but I guess we are still seeing a lot of that in 78. It sounds cool
Yeah.
though. I mean, it's funny when you basically, I think I read online somewhere it was a drastic oversimplification, but they're basically like, oh yeah, it's kind of like upside down breakout or something like that because you're catching instead of deflecting, but it's just a minor twist and a couple changes, and you're right, it does make it this whole different game, which like where would Mario mini games or whatever other kind of tiny games be without some guy with a basket trying to catch apples or something like that.
Yeah. Or some guy like throwing up a pizza and then having to catch it again. I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I feel like when I went into it, I was like, oh god, this is gonna be just me catching 1,000 little pong balls that are spawning from the ceiling. But I'm glad that like the little changes, like you can see every single ball that's gonna drop in the beginning of the game. So that tells you how far you are. And they're not just little pong balls. There's like 3 different rows and 3 different sprites of oblong boulder shapes. It's just like little things that make it a little bit better.
Right.
And they didn't have to do all of them. I think they could have pushed it further, but I'm glad that they made those little changes to make it a little bit more special than just catching pong balls, which is that's all it is at the end of the day. But
Right.
made it feel a little bit cooler. Let's move on. We've been doing a lot of reviews. Let's do a couple honorable mentions quick. This first one is by Sidame? I don't know. But they made a clone of Avalanche by Atari called Cascade. So that's their version. It's a straight up clone.
And then next up we have Micon Block by SNK, which is a clone of Breakout. Also came out with a cocktail table version called Micon Kit in July. And then we have Touchdown by Nihon Vending, which is apparently a football themed Breakout game, which is confusing. I mean, maybe it's a kicker just repeatedly kicking the balls. That would be pretty funny. And like hitting them off a wall or something.
Yeah. I think it was just like in cabinet art. I think it was just Breakout for the gameplay, but
Right, exactly. But it's got a football player on the side.
Yeah. And then continuing with some Breakout clones, there's a lot of these 78, so I tried to break them up a little bit. But we've got Off Limits by the company TBM, which is a Breakout clone, but it also has 7 different variations apparently, involving like wells in the bricks. So there, a section of bricks that were already gone when you started the game, or like breaks in the opposite wall where there's a space in between the rows. But we really don't have a lot of info, just the flyer. Apparently, a marquee was found of this, so the actual physical cabinet, but it didn't have insides or any of the innards of it when it was found. So I think there is a group of people in the main world looking for it, which is fun, but hopefully they'll find it soon. We also have Off Limits by Zakaria, which is a license of the TBM game. But again, I think we only have the flyer for that one as well.
Then next up, we have Wildwood by Sega. It's a light gun type game, but no real info. Probably just some sort of Western shooting game. And next, we have another Breakout clone, but it was interesting enough that we wanted to take a little bit more of an in-depth look at it. And it's Block Fever by Nintendo. So, of course, that's a big part of the reason why we wanted to take a look at it. We've also seen it called block fiber somewhere, but it's got to be block fever, right?
Yeah,
Like
it's
that
got to be
just
Black Fever.
makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
So block fever, it is a breakout game, 1 to 2 players. There were 2 different scores on the screen, but it's just taking turns. It doesn't look like anyone's playing at the same time. The cabinet is super weird. It's a cocktail table style cabinet where it looks like you face the other player, and it has, like the flat screen on the table. But the construction of it is just not very like bar cocktail table. It looks more like your teacher's desk in high school. It's really weird. You got to look up a picture of it because I just found the flyer for it. Or Ben, when he showed me the flyer for it, I was like, this is very strange. But maybe it was the aesthetic at the time in Japan. Who knows? But the gameplay for it is a breakout clone, what you would expect. Pretty pure and simple, but it does have 3 game modes. Game mode A is just normal breakout. Game mode B is there are 4 blinking blocks that go off and on as the game progresses, and they're sort of in the center of the typical like breakout section of bricks. And when you hit one of those blinking blocks, it causes the whole set of blocks to move down towards you. So everything kind of starts moving faster because the distance from your paddle to the blocks is a lot closer. I couldn't tell if it kept moving after you hit one of the blinking blocks or if it was sort of increments as you hit each one. But either way, just an interesting twist on it. And probably the coolest one to me is game mode C, which is where the blocks just sort of slowly scroll and wrap around the screen from the right side. So, like any of the gaps that you've made will travel all the way across the screen, but they're slowly moving. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to aim your shot and to know where your shot's going to hit and how it's going to deflect back at you. So sort of similar to, I forget if it was Circus or a clone that had the moving balloons, but in this one, they're all moving the same direction. And like previous breakout games, after a certain number of points or a certain amount of time, the paddle gets smaller and the ball speed increases. And the paddle in this one gets very, very tiny. It looks super difficult. That's basically everything going on, everything that does different. So just wanted to give it a quick rating. For graphics, I gave it a 1 out of 10. The game modes look cool, but it's black and white. Doesn't really change much graphically. The movement on the screen from all the blocks is a nice change of pace, but since everything's still black and white, it's just not super interesting. But I do want to say there's something kind of inexplicably like clean about the whole display. Like it still just looks like a good video game visually, despite how boring it is. Like it's just easy to read everything. Everything pops. I think there's gaps between the blocks, which kind of helps instead of them being all run together. But yeah, It looks good. It's just not exciting. Doesn't have color. Nothing great going on there. For sounds, I gave it a 0.5 out of 10. I think it's just 2 different Pong beeps, slightly different than what we're used to hearing, but not different enough to be anything super special, really. And then for gameplay, I gave it a 2 out of 10. I like breakout games a lot, so that's part of why it just looks like this plays a good game of breakout. So I feel like, hey, it's got to be fun to play. It has nice variations, even though there's only 3 of them, and one of them is just normal breakout. I think it's a little bit more that just gives you that little extra incentive to come back and play it a couple more times. And for relevance, I went really high on this basically just because it's by Nintendo. I gave it a 7 out of 10, even though it's just a breakout clone. It does some things a little bit different, and since I don't know too much about early gaming history in Japan, and we mainly focused on the US, I would kind of wondering, since this is a competent breakout game, if this was pretty good for the time, despite the fact that it didn't have color. I'm now going back on that thought a little bit, knowing that the Visicom had color, and it was a home console. Maybe this did still seem very far behind for an arcade cabinet, but either way, it's Nintendo doing video game stuff. Pretty neat breakout game that's a little bit different.
Yeah.
And overall, I gave it a 1.5 out of 10. Nothing stellar, or groundbreaking, really, but it's got 2 fun new game modes that are pretty interesting and really smooth gameplay, and it's from Nintendo. So, yeah, if it had to be a breakout clone that I was reviewing, I'm glad it's a Nintendo one, so at least I can be like, oh, look, they're doing stuff. They exist. They
I
haven't made
know.
Mario yet, but at least they're around.
And I feel like for the most part, their games is nothing crazy, but they're like very competent versions of things we've already seen. I feel like that's been the case with their home consoles so far, and I think most of their arcade stuff has been like light gun games, but
Right.
it's like not just a straight port of Breakout, which is pretty cool.
Exactly. And like you said, it plays really well. Wish it was in color, but like it plays a good game of Breakout.
Yeah. And it's a cocktail table, so maybe it gets some extra passes because of that.
True. Yeah.
I don't know. But let's move on. We've got only 2 more honorable mentions. It's the Russian consoles that we teased in the beginning. Let's start with the ESCI Video 1 and 2 by Electronica, which I didn't know this, but apparently is a company run by the government. Is that right, Wes?
Yeah, it was the brand name for the Ministry of the Technology Industry or something along those lines.
That's really cool. I didn't know that, and all of a sudden I feel like it all makes sense.
Right.
um, so this one and the next one are a little different because they use a Soviet-made chip, which is I think the first time that it's come up. Or actually, maybe we did mention it 2 weeks ago, but I'm gonna try it. I did a Google Translate to know what some of the characters were. So I think it's called the K145 IK17. That might be wrong, but it is in Russian. But it's the Soviet clone of the 8500, and the ESCI Video 1 and 2. The one had just the usual 8500 Pong games in black and white, and then the O2 version had the light gun and the light gun games on it as well. So that's what was different there.
And then we have the Video Sport and Video Sport M, also by Electronica. We've seen some dates as late as 81 for these, but they were more consoles that used that same chip, Cyrillic alphabet characters. So I forget what Ben said, but the same chip that he just said. And it doesn't seem like there was too much different with these either, other than maybe they were slightly improved.
It's weird to me that these Soviet first gen consoles, there's still like so many that just use the same couple of games, which is true in the Western world as well.
Right. Yeah.
Like companies did that. I wonder why. It must have just been like maybe a metal box and they're like, this one's better. So it's got double the price. I don't know.
It's even funnier though when it's just like one company who is producing them for the whole country or a group of countries, and they're like, we're just going to keep re-releasing the same things.
I just think it's really interesting that they made their own chips for these, even though they played the exact same games as the 8500, and they already had the Turner, which was an 8500. Why not just keep doing that?
I could easily see that being a Soviet pride thing, you know? It's like, these need to be made in the country, otherwise we're using capitalist American products, you know? So it's interesting. I wouldn't be too surprised if that's what fueled that.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us today, guys. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about the Soviet Union. I definitely did. And then we had a bunch of weird, cool games today. I did the Visicom Com-100, aka RCA Studio 2.5. To me, it was really the console that the RCA Studio 2 should have been. It didn't have all the games that the RCA Studio 2 had, but it did have some new ones that I thought were pretty good, actually. I feel like I'm never going to forget sumo wrestling. It was just such a weird one. Just so out there, but it was pretty cool. And then Wes did Atari Mini Golf, a prototype that was pretty far down the pipeline, though. I did Avalanche, which was maybe not Atari's like craziest game of all time, but I feel like it still had a lot of unique aspects to it. And then Wes did Block Fever by Nintendo. It's always good to see Nintendo, even if they're just doing breakout clones.
Exactly. And so make sure to check out our Twitter. We'll put announcements there if we are delaying an episode or when our episodes are coming up. Go check out our website. We have lists of tons of the games that we've done, along with pictures and videos and our ratings to associate them with. And then, lastly, if you have any questions, make sure to send us an email.
And with that, we'll see you in the next one.
See y'all next time.